The lights in Hollywood studios never dim. Cameras flash. Reporters ask loud questions and celebrities walk quickly to avoid attention. But today, something unusual was happening. A famous talk show, The Jordan Lane Show, just announced a shocking guest. Vin Diesel. Jordan Lane was not just any talk show host. He was sharp, rude at times, and never afraid to make fun of someone, especially if it got views. His show was famous for controversial interviews and putting celebrities on the spot. That's why the whole internet exploded when it was revealed that Vin Diesel would be his next guest. People started talking. Why would Vin go on that show? Doesn't he know Jordan's going to humiliate him? Some fans were excited, some were nervous, and some thought it would be a disaster. But Vin Diesel wasn't worried. He stood inside his dressing room looking at himself in the mirror. Dressed in a simple black shirt, jeans, and boots, he didn't look like someone scared of a few tough questions. His assistant, Maria, walked in holding a tablet. "Vin, are you sure you want to do this? You know what he's going to ask. You know how he talks about people's beliefs." Vin gave her a small smile. "I know exactly what they're trying to do," he said calmly. "Let's see how it plays out." Maria sighed but nodded. She had worked with Vin for years and knew once his mind was made up, there was no turning back. Outside the studio, a crowd had gathered. Fans, reporters, and even people who didn't like Vin, all waiting to see what would happen. Would he walk off the show? Would he argue back? Or would something else happen? Inside, Jordan Lane prepared for the interview. He adjusted his suit, looked in the mirror, and smirked. "Tonight's gonna be big," he said to his producer. "Let's see if Hollywood's tough guy can handle a few real questions." The studio audience clapped as the cameras rolled. Jordan walked out, full of energy and charm. "Welcome back. Everyone, tonight we have a very special guest. You know him from action movies, big muscles, fast cars. Please welcome Vin Diesel." The crowd erupted in applause. Vin walked out with a calm smile, waving gently to the audience. He shook Jordan's hand and sat down in the big chair across from him. "Vin," Jordan started, "thanks for being here. I'm surprised you came. Not everyone is brave enough to sit in that chair." Vin chuckled lightly. "I've faced worse things than interviews." The crowd laughed. Jordan leaned forward, eyes gleaming. He liked guests who gave him good sound bites. They began with normal questions, movies, family, fans. Vin answered smoothly. But then, after about 10 minutes, Jordan shifted in his seat. The mood in the studio changed. "So Vin," he began, a smirk creeping across his face. "I've read interviews where you talk about faith, hope, belief, in God and all that. Do you really believe in all that stuff?" The room fell silent. Vin didn't move for a second. The smile faded from his face. Even the audience leaned forward in their seats. Maria watched from backstage, heart racing. Jordan pressed again. "I mean, come on. You're a tough guy. You drive cars through fire, you jump off buildings, and then you talk about faith? Isn't that a little soft for someone like you?" Vin finally looked up, his eyes meeting Jordan's. No one could read his expression. He didn't look angry. He didn't look hurt. But he did look serious. People in the audience started whispering. Some looked shocked. Others waited with bated breath. Maria covered her mouth with her hand. She knew this was the moment the internet would remember. Vin leaned forward slightly. He placed both hands calmly on his knees. And then, the lights in the studio didn't move. The audience sat frozen. Everyone waited for what Vin Diesel would say. Jordan Lane leaned back in his chair, confident and smiling. He thought he had just asked the perfect question to shake things up. But Vin didn't rush to answer. He took a slow breath. He looked at the floor for a moment, then back at Jordan and then at the audience. And then he spoke, calmly but with a deep strength in his voice. "You know, Jordan," he began, "people think faith is weakness. That if you believe in something bigger than yourself, you must be soft and or scared." The studio was completely silent now. No one whispered, no one moved. "But let me tell you something," Vin continued. "I've done a lot of things in my life. Dangerous stunts, lost people I loved, gone through pain no camera ever sees. And the only thing that kept me standing through all of that was faith. Jordan's smile faded a little. Vin turned to the audience. When I was young, my family didn't have much. My mom worked 3 jobs. Some nights we didn't know if we'd have dinner. There was no movie script for that. No fast car to save us. Just prayer. Just belief. A woman in the crowd put her hand to her heart. Another audience member nodded, eyes watery. Vin looked back at Jordan. "You ask me if I really believe?" he said. "I believe because I've lived it. I've seen miracles happen when everything else failed. I've seen love come back from places that looked dead. And I've seen people rise, not because they had money or fame, but because they had faith." Jordan blinked, unsure of what to say. He tried to cut in with a sarcastic line. "Well, guess it's working for you?" But Vin didn't let the moment slip. "No, Jordan," he said firmly. "It's not about working for me, it's about saving me. Every single time I could have quit, faith kept me going. Faith isn't a punchline, it's the reason I'm still here." The audience started to clap. Slow at first, then louder. People stood up. Even Jordan looked stunned. The camera cut to Maria backstage. She had tears in her eyes. She whispered, "That's Vin. That's the real him." Jordan looked around, clearly surprised by the reaction. He adjusted his notes, trying to bring back control. Okay, let's move on," he said quickly, a little shaken. But Vin wasn't done. "One more thing," he said. Jordan paused. Vin leaned closer to the camera. "If you're watching this and you feel like giving up, don't. I've been there. I know how it feels. But hold on, you're not alone. Something bigger is watching over you, just believe that." The room went completely still again. A few audience members were crying now. Others had hands over their mouths. The cameras went to commercial break. The audience was still buzzing, some standing and whispering to each other. Vin Diesel quietly stood up and walked off stage toward the green room. He didn't look angry. He didn't look proud. Just calm, like a storm had passed. But behind the scenes, things were heating up fast. Jordan Lane slammed his cue cards onto the table the moment the cameras were off. "What was that?" he snapped at his assistant. "That wasn't supposed to happen. He flipped the whole thing on me." His assistant looked nervous. "Sir, the audience loved it. Social media's blowing up. People are saying it's the best moment on the show. Ever." Jordan frowned. "Yeah, but not for me. I was supposed to be in control." Meanwhile, Vin sat alone in the green room, sipping water. Maria entered, holding her tablet. "You broke the internet," she said softly. Vin looked at her with a small smile. "Not the plan." "Well, it happened. Look at this." She turned the screen toward him. Thousands of messages were pouring in. "Vin just changed my life. I was going to give up, then I heard this. That's not a celebrity. That's a real man." Vin read a few, then looked away, a little emotional. "I didn't say it to go viral. I said it because it's true." Maria nodded. "I know, that's why it worked." But outside the room, Jordan was pacing like a wild animal. "He embarrassed me on my show," he growled. "He made me look like the bad guy." His producer stepped in. "Maybe it's not about who looked good or bad. Maybe it's about the truth. The people loved it." Jordan's eyes darkened. "We're cutting that part from the replay." "You can't," the producer said. "It's already everywhere. It's being shared like wildfire." Jordan stormed away, furious. Meanwhile, back in the green room, Vin received a phone call. It was his mother. "I saw you on TV," she said, her voice shaking. "Mom," Vin said gently, "I hope I didn't embarrass you." She laughed softly. "Embarrass me? Baby, you made me proud. That little boy who used to pray beside the window every night, he's still in you." Vin didn't speak for a moment. He felt his eyes sting. But then, another surprise. Vin Diesel followed the nervous intern down a quiet hallway behind the studio. Every step he took felt heavier than the last. He hadn't seen his childhood pastor in nearly 25 years. The intern stopped in front of a small waiting room and pointed. "He's inside, sir." Vin nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped in. Sitting in the room was an elderly man with a warm face, kind eyes, and a Bible resting on his lap. He stood slowly as Vin entered. "Vincent," the man said softly. Vin blinked. "Pastor Green." They shook hands, and for a moment there was only silence. "You haven't changed much," Pastor Green said, smiling gently. "Still carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." Vin chuckled quietly. "Maybe a little more muscle this time." The pastor laughed, then sat down. "I saw the show, I saw what you said, and I had to come." Vin leaned forward. "Why now, after all these years?" The old man looked serious. "Because the world needs men like you right now. Men who stand for something. Men who remind people what faith really means, not the loud kind, not the perfect kind, but the kind that acts when no one's looking." Vin looked down. "I lost my way, Pastor. I got caught up in the fame, the noise. I thought maybe I wasn't worthy to speak about faith anymore. But you were worthy, son," the pastor said. "You never stopped caring. You never stopped believing. That moment on stage, that wasn't just powerful, it was truthful. That's why it reached people's hearts." Vin was quiet. A memory flashed through his mind. Him as a young boy, sitting in the last pew of a small church, listening to this very man preach about courage, love, and grace. "You taught me how to believe," Vin said softly. The pastor nodded. "And now you reminded others how to believe again." Suddenly, Maria knocked on the door and peeked in. "Vin, sorry to interrupt. There's a reporter outside. Says he needs a comment. Says people are gathering outside the studio." Vin raised an eyebrow. "What kind of gathering?" She handed him her phone, showing a live stream. Outside the studio, hundreds of people were standing, holding signs, lighting candles, singing. Some of the signs read, "Faith is not weakness." "Thank you, Vin. You gave us hope." Vin stared at the screen, overwhelmed. "I just wanted to answer a question," he whispered. "I didn't expect this." Pastor Green smiled and stood again. "The truth has a way of reaching hearts, whether you plan it or not." Vin looked up at him. "What should I do now?" Vin Diesel stood just steps away from the studio door, ready to face the crowd waiting outside. But the sudden screech of tires grabbed everyone's attention. A sleek black car stopped sharply in front of the entrance. The driver jumped out and opened the back door. From it stepped Martin Rees, a well-known TV critic, author, and the same man who once wrote a brutal article titled "Vin Diesel, Just Muscles, No Meaning." Reporters gasped. Cameras started flashing. Studio staff whispered nervously. Vin's eyes narrowed as Martin walked toward him, completely calm, dressed in a gray suit and holding a single piece of paper. Maria whispered beside Vin, "Isn't that the guy who trashed your whole career a few years back?" Vin nodded slowly. "That's him." Martin stopped a few feet away, looked Vin in the eye and said, "We need to talk in private." Pastor Green watched from the hallway, sensing tension but saying nothing. Vin didn't flinch. "Say what you came to say." Martin looked around, then lowered his voice. "Look, I said a lot of things about you. I called you fake. I said your movies were shallow. And when you started talking about faith, I laughed." Vin stayed quiet. Martin continued, "But yesterday, I watched you on that stage. You weren't acting, you weren't selling a movie, you were real. And I realized, I've been wrong." He held out the paper. It was a printed draft of a new article titled, "The Moment Vin Diesel Silenced the World with Truth." "I came here to give you this before it goes live," Martin said. "You deserve to know. I'm not here to destroy you this time. I'm here to tell the truth." Vin looked at the title, stunned. "You changed something in me," Martin said softly. "And not just me. People are reading. People are talking. They're remembering who they are." Maria blinked. "This is unreal." The doors opened. A staff member rushed out. "Vin, the crowd is getting louder. They're waiting for you to say something." Vin looked at Martin, then at Pastor Green, and finally at Maria. He walked toward the exit. The sunlight hit his face as the studio Doors opened wide. Hundreds of people stood outside, phones raised, eyes filled with hope. Vin stepped onto the small stage in front of the studio. He looked at them, hands in his pockets, searching for the right words. Then he began to speak. I didn't come here to be a hero. I didn't come to argue or preach. I came because someone asked me a question. And I answered it with my heart. He paused. The crowd stayed silent. We all believe in something. And sometimes when the world laughs at that belief, we hide it. But I won't hide anymore. And neither should you. Tears streamed down faces in the crowd. A little girl held a sign that read, You gave me courage, Vin. The sun was setting. Behind the studio as Vin Diesel stepped down from the stage. The crowd still stood in awe, replaying his powerful words in their minds. He had come to a talk show expecting to be mocked, and ended up inspiring hundreds, maybe millions. Back inside, Maria walked beside him holding her phone. Vin, she said, almost breathless. Your speech is already trending. People are calling it the most honest moment ever broadcasted. On live TV. Vin didn't reply. He just nodded and kept walking, deep in thought. As they reached the waiting car, Pastor Green stood near the door, smiling proudly. I've watched many people speak about faith, he said softly. But not everyone lives it the way you do. Vin looked him in the eye. It's not about being perfect. It's about standing up when it matters. He turned to Maria and added, That's why we're not stopping here. Maria raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Vin opened the car door and motioned for them to get in. I'll explain on the way. There's something I've been working on for years. Quietly. As the car pulled away from the studio, Vin leaned forward and opened a file from his bag. Inside were documents, photos, and blueprints. Maria stared in shock. Is this a school? Vin nodded. A school. A safe place. For kids like I once was. God, for kids who are bullied, doubted, or feel invisible. Pastor Green's eyes lit up. A place that teaches values, not just books? Exactly, Vin said. They'll learn discipline, strength, respect, and yes, faith. Not just religion, but belief in themselves, in kindness, and in second chances. Maria whispered, This could change lives. It will, Vin replied firmly. He looked out the window as the car passed a local youth shelter. Children stood outside, some barefoot, others wearing worn-out jackets. One boy caught his eye. He looked straight at Vin, then gave him a quiet wave. Vin waved back, heart heavy and hopeful. That boy right there, Vin said, pointing. That's who I'm doing this for. Maria quickly grabbed her phone. I'll start planning the announcement, press release, website, everything. Vin stopped her gently. Not yet. First we go meet the people, not just talk about them. Talk to them. The car took a turn and headed toward a neighborhood community center. When they arrived, Vin stepped out and was greeted by a few volunteers. They didn't expect a movie star. Are you here for the cameras? One of them asked. Vin shook his head. No cameras today, just hands. I came to help. And with that, he rolled up his sleeves and started stacking chairs, handing out food, and sitting with kids. Word began to spread, not because of a post, but because of the people. A girl named Tasha whispered to her friend, That's Vin Diesel, and he's here, for us. Back home, news headlines began to roll in. From fame to faith, Vin Diesel's mission to build a better tomorrow. Talk show clip goes viral. What Vin said has the whole world talking. Vin Diesel visits local centers, talks about new school. For the forgotten, Vin didn't read them. He was too busy listening to a little boy who said, I want to be like you when I grow up. Vin smiled. No, kid. Be better. Final scene. Back in his home office, Vin pinned a note on his wall. Simply read, Truth, courage, kindness, begin with these. The camera zooms in slowly on the note. A voiceover says,